Well, hello. Hello, my fellow sensitive people. It is I, Whimsy, and today we're going to be doing a little bit of tarot card reading. But before we get started, it would be great if you could like, share, and subscribe to the channel. I had a lot of comments on the previous post I did, which was a meditation remote viewing a couple of days ago that discussed the current war with Iran. In that video, I made some statements that had people upset, and I think we should probably talk about it. What I said in that video was that I said that the conflict with Iran, between the United States and Iran, basically, we were in World War III. And let me explain a little bit about why I said that. We know that Iran, for example, is an ally of Russia, and we know that Russia is at war with Ukraine, right? And we know that the United States has allies and vested interest in the Middle East in the form of trade routes, etc. And we've talked about protecting trade routes. Who has control of the trade routes? Also, fear of a nuclear power. Our enemies become gaining a nuclear power. People have asked about Israel being a nuclear power. Israel is an ally of the United States. Israel's job is to be a Western ally. That's its, the reason why it's supported militarily is because it protects our trade routes and interest in the Middle East. This is especially vital after U.S. troops withdrew from North Syria and Lebanon, creating a vacuum where Iran could move in via their proxy armies, Hezbollah. One of the worst mistakes we made was when Trump pulled U.S. troops out of that area, leaving the Kurds vulnerable to massacre. We basically left our allies sitting ducks, and that included Israel when Hezbollah began to push forward onto their northern border from Lebanon. And this, of course, led to more spats, more fighting between Hezbollah and Israel. But part of the reason that happened was because U.S. troops pulled back and left. China is kind of in the middle of this. China is kind of in the middle of this in the sense that China has given aid and trade to both Iran and Russia in the form of oil for weapons, oil for technology, et cetera, et cetera. And so you have this dynamic building between those people who support the West, or those governments that support the West, and those governments who do not. North Korea, China, and Russia do not support the West and the Western trade routes. And then you have those countries that support and want Western control of the trade routes. But specifically, the trade routes we're talking about are the Straits of Hormuz, the oil, and the products that are passing through the straits. That's going to cost you a pretty penny if we don't have control of that, right? And then the other, of course, would be the Suez Canal. And of course, we have we have various different proxy armies that are attacking, that are being funded by Iran, starting with Hezbollah. We talked about Islamic Jihad, Hamas in Gaza. So basically, Gaza, when Israel pulled out in 2005, Iran moved in. And so you have these pro-Iranian extreme leftists. They're pro-Iran, pro-Russia. They're anti-Western. So the progressive left, the extreme left, is anti the United States and pro-Eastern, right? So so if you're looking at TYT, it's pro-Iran and it's pro-Russia. It's not pro the United States. It's anti the United States. It's anti-Israel, pro-Iran, pro-Russia, pro-China. Could World War III have been avoided? In a sense, yes. We could have sat and waited until things got a lot worse, until Iran continued to develop its weapons programs And at that point, we would have been sitting ducks to a very dangerous country that was armed to the teeth with nuclear weapons. So, in a sense, what I said, and I stand by it, was that these military actions were taken in order to avoid a more serious catastrophe in the future, like letting steam off. You know, if you have a pot that's going to explode and you let a little steam off. And so it looked to me as a remote viewer as if the powers that be had chosen this military action and to dismantle Iranian leadership because of fears of what could happen in the future if they did not. If you're talking about a full blown nuclear event that could become a global nuclear event, we're very close. And I think if we had waited, we would be in a very bad situation. And I think that that was the intelligence that came out of the Pentagon. It's not politically correct. And I don't think that it helps the Democrats to say things. It's going to help us maybe win the midterm elections, but it's not going to be fact based. And I think it's important for us to be fact based. And the facts are that this action was prepared through multiple Western intelligence agencies. They prepared this attack over a course of several years. Just being able to have exploding pagers in the hands of every member of Hezbollah, the amount of planning it took for Israel to do that, so that Hezbollah members had exploding pagers, right? Having high ranking members of the IRGC be Mossad agents ordering Hezbollah to carry pagers, and then giving the technology of building the inside workings of those pagers to be bombs. That took Mossad a lot of, they had to be very deep inside of Iran, and it had to be planned for a really long time. Same with the fact that Mossad had gone in and had assassinated leading members of Hamas inside of Iran because they were in IRGC leadership. And some of those IRGC leaders who were Mossad agents successfully have fled to Israel, and some were captured and killed. But the point I'm trying to make is that this operation had been planned for many, many years. And it was part of what was known as the 5 phases of operation that the Western intelligence agencies had come to. And the 5th of those phases would be the downfall of the Iranian IRGC leadership. And so it wasn't a surprise to me as a researcher, and I use remote viewing in my research. What didn't surprise me when they began the attacks on Iran. What I meant when I talked about World War III and why I felt a moral responsibility to be the person to tell you that was because my dissertation, my doctoral research had been on a pilot program that takes place in Rafah to create oasis zones, neutral oasis zones of peace, to get people away from violence. And it appears that a pilot program very similar to that is being started in Rafah, which matches very closely to what I was trying to build. So I felt a moral responsibility because of my work and because of my own research and because I was the first person publicly in the world, actually, to publish the 5 phases. I was the first person to do that. I did feel a moral responsibility to come back on and say, based on the research I've done just as a researcher, not as a card reader, just as a researcher. I moonlight as a card reader and I have a lot of fun, and my name is Whimsy, and we get goofy and silly. And I think people sometimes get confused because I'm a complicated person. There's a part of me that is having fun with tarot, and I love the woo woo stuff. And then there's another part of me that can sit down and do real research and publish strong thesis papers and justify those theses. And in 2023, starting in November of 2023, I worked very hard to build a system, which was the Anderson Oasis protocol, which was given to a lot of different people. And I believe some of those ideas were shopped around. And I think that some of those ideas will likely be adopted. So, yes, I did feel a moral responsibility because as a peace activist, I was very involved in, in my professional life with doing that, trying to build peace zones in conflict areas based on the old Oasis principles that we had seen in, say, Saudi Arabia 4,500 years ago, these interconnected oasis zones with trade routes. That was the research I was doing. So when you look at it globally and you look at the competitions for trade and you look at the evolution of a new trade route that will bring in trillions, not only to the Middle East, but Europe and India as well, it became very obvious with fears of Iran. I think Iran had some conscious awareness of how big the Abraham Accords was becoming. The Abraham Accords was becoming very, very big. But I don't think that Iran understood the amount of money that those countries aim to make when they are no longer in the picture. And when Iran is no longer in the picture, there's a lot of money to be made for the West. So Saudi Arabia is now in the war. This was something that we had anticipated. A couple of years ago, about 1.5, 2 years ago, I sent the Anderson Oasis protocol to Mohammed bin Salman's people in the hopes that he would contribute to the rebuild of Gaza, helping the people there and building peace zones there. And from the feedback I received, the response was positive. And then I was happy to see Mohammed bin Salman in the United States with Elon Musk and Donald Trump discussing the rebuild of Gaza, because copies of the Anderson Oasis Protocol had been shopped around via Benny Gantz through Unity, which was the party that I had been supporting. I had not been supporting Bibi Netanyahu. There was some confusion. People thought that I was a Bibi supporter. I'm actually a Benny Gantz Unity supporter. So he got copies. The PM of Israel got copies because he's the PM of Israel. He's the Prime Minister of Israel, and you have to work with whoever's in power. And he turned around and gave a copy of the Anderson Oasis Protocol to Elon Musk. And then I personally, because Elon Musk wanted to invest in a Marshall Plan, and then I personally made outreach to Mr. Musk in the hopes that he would fund part of it. I wasn't aware particularly of his controversial side, the accusations of racism. I just thought he was a rich environmentalist. And what did I know? He owned Tesla, right? So I don't really keep track of those sorts of things. But so now we're at a situation where a map has leaked, and the map shows Elon Musk investing in those no man's land oasis zones, which again take place outside of Gaza. So they're basically oasis zones on the border of Gaza so that we can increase the space for the people of Gaza, but also create neutral zones so that people can own land and get away from all of the crazy. So that was why I felt I had a small part in this, in the sense that I had a small pilot program that looks to be backed by some important people. I'm very grateful. Thank you for that my pilot program appears to have been adopted. And yeah, I felt because of that side of my life, the part of me that's the researcher that did that, I did that. I'm proud of that. I'm going to continue to work in that area. I'm going to continue to develop those peace zones throughout the world so that we can get closer to peace, right? Peace is good. So I felt that because my research overlapped with what was going on in the greater scheme of things, my own little world, my own little project, I did feel that I had a moral responsibility to say something, because I supported those 5 phases. And I believe because Joe Biden had openly come out with the 3 phases.
The deal has been reached between Israel and Hamas. The deal is structured in 3 phases. Phase 1 will last 6 weeks. It includes a full and complete ceasefire, withdrawal of Israeli forces from all the populated areas of Gaza, and the release of a number of hostages held by Hamas, including women.
Which matched the first three phases of the 5 phases. For all of those reasons, I felt confident that had Biden been in power, we would have seen military strikes eventually. Inevitably, there would have been military strikes against Iran. It would have been inevitable. Yeah. So now Zelensky is at the funeral of Lindsey Graham, which is taking place at the Capitol. Many of you know that. I believe in the rotunda, people are going and paying their respects. Zelensky had an interaction with Bibi Netanyahu. I thought that was significant. They hadn't spoken in about 3 years. We talked about Putin's involvement in the attack on October 7th, which took place on his birthday, and the fact that Vladimir Putin had been meeting with Hamas terrorists 3 weeks before the attack at the Nova Music Festival, that there was really strong evidence to suggest that not only was Putin aware of the attack, and he admitted that he was aware of the attack before the attack happened, but that he had possibly supported and even instigated the attack. So then the next question we have to ask ourselves is, why would Putin be attacking Israel? Or why would Putin be supporting Iran in attacks against Israel? Remember, Iran and Russia share trade via there's the Caspian Sea and there's the Black Sea, and there's a lot of trade that goes on between Turkey, Iran, and Russia on those seas. And those are ancient trade routes. And so when the West comes in with a trade route and threatens those trade routes, you're going to see aggression on the part of Iran. And when Zelensky received sensitivity and support from Israel, he is being supported by Aronofsky, who's an Israeli Russian who owns Channel One, I believe it is, in Ukraine, and paid for Zelensky's campaign. It looked to Putin as if Israel was backing Ukraine in the war, and that was probably what instigated Russia to retaliate. Why Putin retaliated and played a part in that retaliation. But after October 7th, it became painfully obvious, I believe, to Israel and to Western intelligence that a couple of things had to happen. And that was the 5 phases. That Putin had to be removed and Russia had to be stabilized with less of a warmonger in power, somebody that you could actually go to the table and negotiate with. That they would have to install or work to remove Putin and install somebody that was able to be less aggressive against the West. And the other thing that became inevitable was the 5th phase, that they would have to remove IRGC from power in Iran. And if those things were accomplished, then the Abraham Accords could succeed and the Oasis could succeed, the vision of a peaceful Gaza with expanded space for its citizens and a trade route that would make the people living there wealthy without fear that they would lose their land. In fact, they would gain land under the new proposal. When the numbers came in that $350 billion would be the annual profits from such a trade route, just going in and out of Gaza to United Arab Emirates, Jordan. This is just the Gaza part, Israel, etc., Egypt, was a $350 billion trade route. It became obvious to me as a researcher that it was game over and that Iran was not long for this world. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Without further ado, let's go ahead. We'll do the empath's prayer and let's go ahead and take a look at the situation. We're going to play now. We're not going to be the researcher. We're going to put on the play hat and let's see what we find out. Thanks for being here. Okay. I want to call on white light protection for myself and this community as we ask permission from Spirit to access the Akashic records. We call on our spirit guides and our good angels to be with us, Please give us the clarity and the wisdom that is needed to empower all of us on our journeys to make the best decisions for ourselves, our families, the planet, the people we love, but also to help those that we may have strife with. And together collectively as a community, we say amen. All right, let's go in. What is going on? It appears that Donald Trump is becoming a lot friendlier to Zelensky. And here is why I believe that is happening. I believe that Zelensky is now friends of Donald Trump. I believe that the United States has changed its attitude regarding the war, and the hardliners, the extreme left and the extreme right that were backing Putin. You know, the one thing the extreme left, the MAGA and the progressive extreme left have in common is they both support Putin and the bloody regime that is Iran. All the fake propaganda coming out of those regimes, right? So you have to ask, what the hell is that about, right? But it appears that Zelensky is the winner and Trump is the loser. It appears from everything that's going on, it appears that Zelensky is the winner and Putin is the loser, and Trump notices that. Lindsey Graham noticed that. Mohammed bin Salman noticed that. They're now having a trade with drones. Also, Saudi Arabia is afraid. They're afraid. They have to fight now. They have no choice. The rest of the Abraham Accords nations have to come in and remove this beast that is Iran, because they understand they will never have peace and they will always be vulnerable. Iran is now bombing Jordan. They've been bombing Saudi Arabia and Bahrain. They've even hit Qatar. Yeah, so basically what we see in the cards, we have the Knight of Wands moving in, and the Karma card is the Six of Cups, which is a desire for peace, and the War card. Again, this is good news. Zelensky is getting supported by Mohammed bin Salman. They want Mohammed bin Salman to join the Abraham Accords, and Mohammed bin Salman is talking about paying for part of the rebuild of Gaza. All of this is positive. And it's also positive that MBS likes Zelensky, right? So all of this is leading to a change of heart by Trump, and it goes back to phase 4. Putin cannot be a part of this. For those people who were trying to back Putin and saying, oh no, he can be a part of the Abraham Accords. No, the data would show that the IRGC and Putin neither can be part of the Abraham Accords. Where we are at right now, the sun is coming out. We're on the other side of this thing. That's what people have to realize. We're on the other side of this thing in the sense that Zelensky is now being supported by everyone in the West. There's been a change of attitude on the part of Donald Trump. This is the other thing we have to take into consideration. And everything is moving towards Oasis and the fall of Iran, the fall of Putin, and the building of something new and amazing. And I think it will herald a great peace. I think these peace zones, I think the Oasis zones, and this new trade route, the tents of Abraham spread along the four corners of the earth, this phenomenon is going to take off, and I think it's going to be something really remarkable. What is above us is the emperor, which is logic, sanity, and leadership. And what sits below us is truth and justice, the sword of truth and justice. What we're coming out of is the flim flam man, and we're headed towards victory in the next 6 months. I definitely think that the West is going to win. I definitely think we will see all 5 phases. I think the Pentagon's data was correct, and I think all 5 phases are necessary to peace. I think that we will see victory within the next 6 months. And I think we will see strong leadership as well. Many people don't want J.D. Vance to be in the middle of this, and they're willing to put up with Donald Trump until elections in 2027, because 2028, is that when the elections are? Because they don't want to deal with J.D. Vance being an obstacle to what they think of as the cure, an obstacle to the opportunity to finally take down the Iranian government, which is what every country in the Middle East appears to want, except for Iraq. And where we are at, investing in our money, the House of Opposition, the wish has been granted. The hope and fear is the Ten of Pentacles, the family legacy, and the final outcome is strong partnerships with the West. I truly, I think it is, again, what I had said, and I will say over and over and over again. So I will say it over and over and over again. The war was started now. The actions were taken now in order to avoid a greater catastrophe later. And now that Putin is weakened, now that Russia is weakened, now that Iran is weakened, we will probably see the toppling of Putin first if they follow the 5 phases. And then finally, we'll see a phasing out of IRGC leadership. Yeah, and the building of a new trade route, which will include the Donbass in the Ukraine, which many people are very excited about because that is the dream of Zelensky. And it means that Zelensky will join the Abraham Accords. Yeah. All right, I want to thank you for watching this quick video from me to you. If you're trying to get in for a reading with me, you can go ahead and find all that information below this video. Be kind to all so that all will be kind to you too. God bless. Peace out. We'll see you next time. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.